The $2.3 million wire transfer notification lit up my phone at 3:47 a.m. on Christmas morning. My brother Jake was at it again. But this time, something inside me snapped. I'm Marcus, and I need to tell you about the moment I discovered that my own family had been slowly, methodically destroying me for over 2 decades, and how they made me believe it was love. You're probably thinking, another rich guy complaining about his problems. I get it. I used to think money solved everything too. Hell, I spent 37 years throwing cash at every crisis, every sob story, every emergency that somehow always happened right before my family needed something expensive. That Christmas morning, staring at Jake's text, "Emergency surgery for Madison, need 2.3 M by noon or they won't operate," I finally saw the pattern. His daughter Madison? The same Madison I'd seen posting vacation photos from Bali just 3 days earlier? The same dying Madison who'd had 5 different terminal illnesses over the past 2 years, each one miraculously cured by my checkbook? My hands were shaking as I typed back, "No." 3 letters. 2 decades of conditioning shattered. The response came within minutes. "Fine. Don't come to Mom's funeral next month. You're dead to us." Wait, what funeral? Mom was alive. I'd talked to her yesterday. That's when I realized this wasn't just about money. This was something much darker, much more calculated than I'd ever imagined. My family hadn't just been using me. They'd been systematically isolating me, manipulating my reality. And I'd been so desperate to feel needed that I'd paid them to torture me. The phone call that followed at 4:23 a.m. would reveal a conspiracy so twisted, so carefully orchestrated, that it would make you question everyone you trust. Because it turns out, when you're the family ATM, people don't just take your money, they take your sanity. What Jake told me in that phone call, what my own mother had been planning for years, will make your blood run cold. Because this isn't just about a millionaire getting conned by his family. This is about how the people who claim to love you can become your worst predators, and how money becomes the weapon they use to slowly murder your soul. I'm about to tell you things that will make you look at your own family differently. Things that will make you question every favor you've ever done, every guilt trip you've fallen for, every time someone made you feel responsible for their happiness. Because after what I discovered, I realized that some families aren't worth saving, and some silences are actually screams you've been too afraid to hear. If you've ever felt like the family bank, if you've ever wondered why your generosity never seems to be enough, if you've ever said yes when everything inside you was screaming no, then you need to hear this story. Hit that like button if you're ready to discover some uncomfortable truths about love, money, and the people who claim they can't live without you. Subscribe, because what I'm about to reveal over the next 10 chapters will change how you see family forever. And trust me, you have no idea how deep this rabbit hole goes. The $2.3 million wire transfer notification lit up my phone at 3:47 a.m. on Christmas morning. My brother Jake was at it again, but this time, something inside me snapped like a bone under too much pressure. I'm Marcus, and I need to tell you about the moment I discovered that my own family had been slowly, methodically destroying me for over 2 decades, and how they made me believe it was love. You're probably thinking, another rich guy complaining about his problems. I get it. I used to think money solved everything, too. That Christmas morning, staring at Jake's text in my empty penthouse overlooking Central Park, I finally saw the pattern with crystal clarity. Emergency surgery for Madison. Need 2.3 M by noon or they won't operate, the message read. Madison, his daughter who'd been posting vacation photos from Bali just 3 days earlier. The same Madison who'd had 5 different terminal illnesses over the past 2 years, each one miraculously cured by my checkbook. My hands trembled as I scrolled through her Instagram again. There she was, radiant and healthy, sipping champagne on a yacht. The cognitive dissonance hit me like a physical blow. How had I been so blind? How had I convinced myself that her mysterious illnesses always coincided with Jake's financial crises? I sat in my leather chair, surrounded by the trappings of success that had become my prison. The silence of my apartment felt deafening. No family photos adorned my walls. I'd never been invited to create memories worth framing. Even my Christmas tree stood bare, a symbol of the emptiness that wealth couldn't fill. With shaking fingers, I typed back, "No." 3 letters. 2 decades of conditioning shattered in an instant. The response came within minutes, each word designed to slice through my resolve. "Fine. Don't come to Mom's funeral next month. You're dead to us." I stared at those words until they blurred. Mom's funeral? I'd spoken to her yesterday. She'd seemed fine, asking about my work, my health, the superficial questions that had replaced genuine intimacy years ago. Something cold settled in my chest. This wasn't grief or anger. It was recognition. The recognition that I'd been living in a carefully constructed lie, and my family were the architects of my emotional destruction. The phone rang at 4:23 a.m., cutting through the suffocating silence like a scream. Jake's name flashed on the screen, and despite everything, I answered. Maybe it was muscle memory. Maybe it was the hope that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. "You selfish bastard!" Jake's voice was different, colder, more calculated than I'd ever heard. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white against the darkness. "Jake, what funeral? Mom is alive. I talked to her yesterday." His laugh was sharp, cutting. "Oh, Marcus, sweet, stupid Marcus. You still don't get it, do you?" There was a pause, and I could hear him breathing, savoring the moment. There is no funeral. There never was emergency surgery. Madison's perfectly fine, living it up on your last payment. The words hit me like physical blows. My chest tightened, making it hard to breathe. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you've been the family cash cow for so long you forgot you were human." His voice carried a cruelty I'd never heard before. "We've been playing you like a violin, brother. Every sob story, every crisis, every guilt trip, carefully orchestrated to keep those checks coming." I stumbled to my window, looking out at the city that suddenly seemed cold and distant. "That's not... You wouldn't..." "Wouldn't what? Take advantage of your desperate need to feel important? Your pathetic desire to be needed?" Jake's words dripped with contempt. Mom and I figured it out years ago. You're so starved for family connection, you'd pay any price to feel loved." My reflection stared back from the window, a man I barely recognized. When had I become so hollow? When had my love become their weapon? "The best part," Jake continued, his voice growing more animated, "is watching you convince yourself it was all real. The gratitude, the promises to pay you back, the family dinners where we'd praise your generosity. All performance art, Marcus, Academy Award worthy." I slumped against the glass, feeling the cold seep through to my bones. But the emergencies, the medical bills, the fake, all of it. We've got a whole network set up. Fake doctors, fake hospitals, fake crisis scenarios. You never questioned anything because you didn't want to. You needed to be the hero too badly. "You want to know how deep this goes?" Jake's voice had taken on an almost gleeful quality, like a child showing off a particularly clever trick. "Remember Sarah's cancer scare 3 years ago? The one that needed experimental treatment in Switzerland? My sister Sarah." The memory came flooding back, her tears, her fear, my immediate response to wire $800,000 for treatment. I'd felt so noble, so necessary. She was getting a facelift in Miami, paid for by your cancer fund, of course. The Swiss clinic? A spa where she spent 2 weeks getting pampered while you worried yourself sick. I staggered backward, my legs giving out as I collapsed into my chair. Each revelation was a physical blow, reshaping my understanding of reality. But she called me from the hospital, crying, saying she was scared. From the spa's meditation room. Sarah's always been a good actress. We coached her on what to say, how to sound weak, how to make you feel like her only hope. Jake's pride in their deception was nauseating. The medical reports we sent you? Photoshopped. The doctor's letters? Written by my friend who's a graphic designer. My mind raced through years of memories, each one now contaminated by this knowledge. Uncle Robert's business bankruptcy that needed $1.2 million to save the family farm? Was that fake too? Cousin Emma's custody battle requiring expensive lawyers? The endless parade of emergencies that had defined our family relationships? "Every single one," Jake said, reading my silence correctly. "We've been documenting your responses, Marcus. Learning what triggers your guilt, what makes you open your wallet fastest. Mom keeps detailed notes. She calls it her Marcus Manual." The room spun around me. A manual. They'd created a manual for manipulating me. "We know that mentioning children gets you fastest. Medical emergencies work better than financial ones. Legal troubles need more buildup but pay higher dividends. And the key ingredient? Making you feel responsible for fixing everything, that's your Achilles heel." I thought about my therapist, Dr. Martinez, who'd tried for years to help me understand why I felt compelled to solve everyone else's problems. She'd called it codependency. I'd called it love. The family dinners, the holiday visits, the birthday calls, all strategic touch points to maintain the relationship and assess your financial status. Mom even hired someone to monitor your business ventures so we'd know when to time our biggest requests. My voice came out as a whisper. "Why?" "Because you made it so easy, Marcus. You're rich, lonely, and desperate to matter to someone. We gave you purpose, and you paid us handsomely for the privilege. You want to talk to the architect of this whole operation? Jake's voice carried a new edge of excitement. Mom's been listening to this entire conversation. She wanted to hear your reaction when the truth came out. My blood turned to ice. Mom had been listening? Every word, every broken breath, every moment of my world crumbling. She'd been there, silent, observing my destruction like it was entertainment. "Hello, sweetheart." Mom's voice came through the speaker, and it was exactly the same warm, loving tone I'd known my entire life. That familiar sweetness now felt like poison. "Mom!" The word came out strangled. This was the woman who'd raised me, who'd kissed my scraped knees, who'd told me bedtime stories. The woman I'd spent decades trying to make proud. "Oh, don't sound so heartbroken, Marcus. We've given you exactly what you wanted. A family that needed you. Without us, you'd just be another lonely rich man with no purpose." Her tone was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather. "We provided you with meaning." I pressed my palm against my chest, trying to stop the ache that was spreading through my rib cage. "I loved you. I trusted you. And we used that love beautifully, didn't we?" There was actual pride in her voice. "Do you know how many hours I've spent studying psychology books, learning about wealthy individuals and their emotional vulnerabilities? I've made this into an art form, Marcus." She'd studied me, like a specimen, like a problem to be solved. The guilt trips weren't accidental, sweetheart. Every time I'd sigh and mention how hard things were getting, how worried I was about the family's future, I was pulling very specific strings. And you danced exactly how I wanted you to. My apartment felt like a cage, the walls closing in with each word. I'd built this life, this success, thinking it would bring me closer to the people I loved. Instead, I'd funded my own psychological torture. Remember when you were 12 and your goldfish died? Mom's voice took on that nostalgic tone I'd always found comforting. You cried for days, blaming yourself, convinced you could have done something to save it. That's when I knew you'd always be the one to carry everyone else's burdens. The memory hit me like a physical blow. I'd forgotten about that goldfish, but she'd been cataloging my empathy, studying my capacity for guilt even as a child. I've been grooming you for this your entire life, Marcus. Every time I praised you for being the responsible one, every time I leaned on you just a little more than your siblings, I was creating the perfect victim. "Let me put this in perspective for you, Marcus," Mom continued, her voice taking on the tone of a teacher delivering a well-rehearsed lesson. "Over the past 20 years, you've given this family approximately $47 million. Would you like to know where it went? 47 million. The number hit me like a sledgehammer. I'd never calculated the total. Each payment had felt separate, justified, necessary. Hearing it as one sum made my stomach lurch. Jake's been living in a $3.2 million house in the Hamptons that you bought under the guise of helping him recover from his business losses. Sarah owns 4 properties across 3 states, all purchased with your emergency funds. I've been collecting art, original Picassos, Marcus, thanks to your concern for my medical expenses. Each revelation was a fresh wound. I gripped the armrest of my chair so hard my fingernails dug into the leather. They'd been living like royalty while keeping me isolated in my guilt-ridden tower. The private jets, the yacht, the European vacations, all funded by your beautiful, generous heart. Her laugh was soft, almost affectionate, which made it exponentially more cruel. We've been living better than you, sweetheart, and you made it possible. I thought about my own life, the takeout dinners alone, the empty penthouse, the sleepless nights worrying about their manufactured crises. While I'd been sacrificing my own happiness for their emergencies, they'd been living in luxury. But here's the beautiful part, she continued. We convinced you that your suffering was noble, that your loneliness was the price of being the family provider. You wore your isolation like a badge of honor. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They hadn't just stolen my money. They'd stolen my life, my relationships, my chance at genuine connection. Every date I'd sabotaged because I was too worried about family problems. Every friendship I'd neglected because I was handling another crisis. All based on lies. Do you know why we kept you single, Marcus? Why we always had a crisis whenever you started getting serious with someone? Mom's voice was almost gentle now, like she was sharing a secret. We couldn't risk you finding real love. Real love would have meant real family, and that would have threatened our income stream. The words hit me like a physical assault. Every relationship that had failed, every woman who'd walked away frustrated by my divided attention, it had all been orchestrated. They'd sabotaged my chance at happiness to maintain their cash flow. Jennifer could have been perfect for you. But remember how Sarah's custody battle suddenly intensified right when you were about to propose? And Michelle, such a sweet girl. But Jake's heart attack scare came at just the right time to break you two up? What's the price of love when the people selling it to you never intended to deliver? You're wondering how we kept this going for so long without anyone else noticing? Mom said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. That's because we made sure you had no one else. The truth of it crashed over me like a wave. I'd been so focused on being the family problem solver that I'd let every other relationship in my life wither and die. My college friends had stopped calling years ago when I'd repeatedly canceled plans for family emergencies. My business associates saw me as reliable but distant, always rushing off to handle some crisis. We monitored your social connections, Marcus. Any friend who seemed to be getting too close, any colleague who might influence your decisions, we made sure they disappeared from your life. Her voice carried the satisfaction of a chess master explaining a perfect game. Remember your friend David from college? The one who tried to warn you about giving Jake so much money? I did remember. David had pulled me aside at our reunion, concerned about the stories I'd shared about family financial crises. He'd been suspicious, asked uncomfortable questions about why everything seemed to happen to us. 2 weeks later, Sarah had called in tears. She'd been in a car accident and needed immediate surgery. We timed Sarah's accident perfectly. You were so consumed with guilt about doubting us that you never spoke to David again. He became a symbol of your disloyalty to family. Mom's voice was almost proud. We turned your conscience into our weapon. The pattern became crystal clear. Every time someone had tried to pull me out of their web, a crisis would emerge that demanded my complete attention and financial resources. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, had suggested setting boundaries with family. The next week, Jake's daughter had needed emergency therapy after a supposed trauma. We've been your only constant, Marcus. Your only family, your only support system. We made sure of that. The manipulation was so complete, so thorough, that I felt dizzy trying to comprehend its scope. Isolation makes people more compliant, more desperate to maintain the few connections they have left. I looked around my apartment, this beautiful, empty space that had become my prison. No family photos, because I was never included in family moments. No close friends, because crises always took priority. No romantic relationships, because emergencies always intervened. They'd created a perfect echo chamber where only their voices could reach me. The holidays were particularly effective. Christmas morning, Thanksgiving dinner, Easter Sunday, we made sure these times were filled with requests and crises. You began to associate family gatherings with obligation rather than joy. Her analysis was clinical, detached, like she was discussing a successful business strategy. I realized I'd stopped looking forward to holidays years ago. Instead of anticipation, I felt dread, wondering what emergency would arise, what check I'd need to write, what guilt I'd need to carry. There's something else, Marcus. Jake's voice cut back into the conversation, and something in his tone made my blood run cold. Mom, should we tell him about the will? My heart stopped. What will? Your will, darling, Mom said, her voice taking on that sweet, maternal tone that now made my skin crawl. The one you signed last year during your food poisoning episode. Remember how concerned we were about your health? The memory came rushing back. I'd been violently ill, food poisoning from a restaurant Jake had recommended. He and Sarah had rushed to my apartment, taking care of me for 3 days while I was bedridden and weak. During my recovery, Mom had brought some business documents for me to sign, saying my lawyer had recommended updating my estate planning while I was thinking about mortality. You weren't poisoned by bad seafood, Marcus. Jake's laugh was sharp and cruel. Sarah slipped something into your drink that night, just enough to make you sick, compliant, and grateful for our care. My hand flew to my throat, as if I could still feel the poison. They drugged me. My own family had drugged me to manipulate me into signing documents while I was vulnerable and disoriented. The new will leaves everything to us, naturally. We convinced you it was the responsible thing to do, taking care of your family, ensuring your legacy. Mom's voice carried that infuriating pride again. You were so grateful for our care during your illness that you didn't question anything. I stumbled to my safe, my legs barely supporting me. With shaking hands, I pulled out the will I'd signed, the papers now feeling like they were burning my fingers. I'd trusted them completely, signed without reading thoroughly, because I'd been so weak, so grateful they were there. The beautiful part is how you thanked us afterward. Sarah's voice joined the call, and I realized my entire family had been listening to my destruction. You kept saying how lucky you were to have such caring family, how meaningless money was compared to love. My sister, the one I'd protected, provided for, worried about, had poisoned me. The woman who used to curl up next to me during thunderstorms as a child had calculated the exact dosage to make me compliant without killing me. We've been planning your death for years, Marcus. Not literally, we're not murderers, but financially, emotionally, psychologically, we've been slowly killing who you used to be. Mom's voice was almost gentle, as if she were comforting me. And you been paying us to do it. The room spun around me. I wasn't just their victim, I was their long-term project. Every relationship they'd sabotaged, every boundary they'd crossed, every manipulation they'd orchestrated had been leading to this moment where they owned not just my present, but my future. But Marcus? Mom's voice carried a new tone, one I'd never heard before. Cold and calculating, like a predator finally revealing its true nature. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, my entire body trembling. What could possibly be worse than what I'd already learned? You see, we discovered something interesting about you very early on. You don't just give money to solve problems, you give it to feel superior. Every time you wrote a check, every time you played the hero, you felt better than us, smarter, more successful, more capable. Her words cut through me like surgical instruments. We weren't just taking your money, sweetheart. We were feeding your ego. The accusation hit me like a physical blow, because somewhere in the deepest part of my soul, I recognized the truth in it. There had been moments, brief, shameful moments, when I'd felt proud of being the one they turned to, the one who could solve what others couldn't. Every grateful hug, every tearful thank you, every promise to pay you back. We were giving you exactly what you needed to feel important. You weren't just our victim, Marcus. You were our willing participant. Her voice was almost gentle now, which made it infinitely more cruel. We couldn't have done this without your complicity. I sank to my knees in the middle of my empty living room, the phone clutched in my white-knuckled grip. They were right. Some part of me had enjoyed being indispensable, had craved being needed, had felt a twisted satisfaction in being the family savior. The saddest part, Jake added, his voice filled with mock sympathy, is that you'll never be able to trust love again. Any relationship you have from now on, you'll wonder if they're using you. Any friend who needs help, any romantic partner who accepts your generosity, you'll question their motives forever. The psychological wound they were inflicting was surgical in its precision. They weren't just destroying my past, they were contaminating my future. Every act of love, every gesture of kindness I might receive would be filtered through this betrayal. We've programmed you to be suspicious of genuine affection because you've learned that love can be performed, purchased, and weaponized. Sarah's voice joined in, and I could hear the satisfaction in it. We've made you incapable of trusting your own judgment about people's intentions. I looked around my apartment, this monument to my success that had become my mausoleum. They'd taken more than my money. They'd taken my ability to believe in love, to trust in family, to have faith in human connections. They'd murdered my capacity for genuine intimacy. So even if you cut us off now, even if you never give us another penny, we've already won. Mom's voice carried finality, like a judge reading a verdict. Because we've made you just like us, suspicious, calculating, and incapable of real love. The silence stretched between us for what felt like eternity. My family, my tormentors, waited for my response, probably expecting me to crumble completely, to beg for their forgiveness, to promise them anything to make the pain stop. Instead, something unexpected happened. In the depths of my devastation, in the ashes of everything I'd believed about love and family, a small flame flickered to life. Not hope, I wasn't ready for that yet, but something else, something that felt like clarity. "You're right," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "About everything. I did enjoy feeling superior. I did feed on being needed. And yes, you've probably damaged my ability to trust love ever again." I could hear their satisfaction through the phone, could almost see them exchanging victorious glances. They thought they'd broken me completely. "But here's what you didn't count on," I continued, rising slowly to my feet. "You've also freed me." The silence on the other end was different now, uncertain, confused. For 20 years, I've been living in fear. Fear that you'd stop loving me. Fear that I'd lose my family. Fear that I'd be alone. But you know what? You were never my family. You were my abusers. And I've been alone this entire time anyway. I walked to my window, looking out at the city lights that now seemed less cold, less distant. You want to know the difference between me and you? When I discover I've been hurting someone, even unknowingly, it destroys me. When you discover you've been destroying someone you claim to love, you feel proud of your technique. My voice grew stronger with each word. You've taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, how to recognize predators who disguise themselves as family. And now I know exactly what love isn't. I could hear them whispering to each other, could sense their growing unease. This wasn't going according to their script. "I'm going to hang up now," I said, feeling something I hadn't experienced in decades, complete freedom from their approval. "I'm going to change my will, change my phone number, and disappear from your lives entirely. You'll never get another penny from me, never hear my voice again, never have the satisfaction of watching me break." "Marcus, wait!" Mom's voice had lost its calculated control, revealing panic underneath. "No, I'm done waiting. I'm done hoping you'll change. I'm done believing in a family that never existed." I felt tears on my cheeks, but they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of liberation. "You've already taken 20 years of my life. You don't get one more second." "You'll regret this." Jake's voice had turned vicious, desperate. "You'll come crawling back when you realize how empty your life is without us." I smiled through my tears. "My life has been empty with you. Now I get to find out what it feels like to fill it with people who actually love me." I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my apartment. But this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't the oppressive quiet of isolation. It was the peaceful quiet of possibility. The first thing I did was call my lawyer, even though it was Christmas morning. Emergency meetings cost extra, but what's money compared to freedom? We spent 3 hours rewriting my will, establishing a foundation that would channel my wealth toward helping others recognize and escape financial abuse. If my pain could prevent someone else's suffering, then maybe it hadn't been completely meaningless. Next, I called Dr. Martinez, my therapist. She'd been trying to help me see this pattern for years, and I'd been too deep in the web to listen. "I'm ready to do the real work now," I told her voicemail. I'm ready to learn how to trust again. Over the following weeks, I began to understand the depth of the programming I needed to undo. Every generous impulse came with anxiety. Was this genuine kindness, or was I seeking validation? Every person who showed me affection triggered suspicion. What did they want from me? The healing process was brutal, like learning to walk again after decades of believing I was meant to crawl. But slowly, carefully, I began to build real relationships. I reconnected with David, who welcomed me back with the kind of grace that reminded me genuine friendship existed. I joined support groups for people who'd experienced financial abuse. Yes, that's a real thing, and yes, it happens more often than you'd think. I learned to say no without guilt. I learned to give without expecting gratitude. Most importantly, I learned the difference between being needed and being loved. 6 months later, I met Sarah, not my sister, but a different Sarah. A kind, independent woman who had her own money, her own life, her own problems she solved without my intervention. When I told her my story, she didn't try to fix me or promise it would all be okay. She just listened, held my hand, and said, "Thank you for trusting me with this." That's when I knew I was healing, when trust became a gift I could give, rather than a weakness others could exploit. My biological family still tries to contact me through lawyers, claiming I owe them something, that family means obligation. But I've learned that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about people who love you not because of what you can provide, but because of who you are when you have nothing left to give. Today, I'm writing this story not for revenge, but for recognition. If you've ever felt like an ATM instead of a human being, if you've ever paid for love you never actually received, if you've ever wondered why your generosity never feels like enough, you're not alone. Love doesn't come with a price tag. Real family doesn't require payment plans. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from people who mistake your value for your wallet. If this story touched something in you, if it helped you recognize patterns in your own life, or if it simply reminded you that you deserve genuine love, please like this video, share your own experiences in the comments, and subscribe for more stories about finding truth in the darkness. Because healing happens when we stop suffering in silence and start speaking our truths out loud. Remember, you are worth more than what you can give. You are deserving of love that costs nothing and gives everything. And sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find yourself.